I'm delighted that I can be with you. My first career was I had founded and run a company. So when the company hit its stride and I was hitting age 40, just decided if I was going to do it, I'd better do it. So I put our number 2 person in charge, and I bailed out and became a doctoral student all over again with 5 kids. It's kind of stupid looking back on it. As I left the company to become an academic, I brought with me a set of puzzles related to innovation. The first one was, if you look across the sweep of business history, most companies which at one point were widely regarded as unassailably successful, a decade or 2 later you found them in the middle of the pack and often at the bottom of the heap. Why is success so hard to sustain was the first question I brought. And the second was quite related to it, it turns out, and that was, I wonder why innovation seems to be so risky and unpredictable. Peter just gave quite a chronicle of the riskiness and increasing expense of innovation in this industry. Whenever venture capitalists put money into a company, they think it will be successful, but statistically only 1 out of 10 make it. And so the pharmaceutical discovery industry, the venture capital industry, have really structured themselves to hedge their bets against the alleged unpredictability of innovation. And part of the puzzle that I brought with me was, I wonder if it really is intrinsically so unpredictable as the data suggest. And so I've just been burrowing away for 17 years now as an academic, trying to understand these problems of innovation. About 10 years ago, I was just minding my own business and got a visit from 2 people. One, Jerry Grossman, was the CEO of the Tufts New England Medical Center in Boston, one of our big teaching hospitals. Another, Elizabeth Armstrong, was a professor on the faculty at the Harvard Medical School. And both of them had the same sales pitch to me. Basically, it was, you know, everybody's been trying to figure out why healthcare is becoming progressively more expensive and less accessible. At their core, these are all problems of managing innovation. And instead of studying healthcare to reach conclusions about healthcare, what if you joined with us to try to examine the industry through the lenses of your research on managing innovation? Maybe you'd be able to see a few things that others haven't been able to see with that perspective. And so I signed up because it was too high an impact of an opportunity for me to pass up. And as Leslie mentioned, we just published a book called The Innovator's Prescription. As a general theme of the book, it is, how can we take something that has become so expensive and so inaccessible and transform it into an industry that offers high-quality services at much lower costs and much greater convenience. Now, to describe why it seems so easy to go up and so hard to go down, I'd like to walk through a case study of an industry that seems very different than yours, but I hope that you see that it's the same as yours. In fact, it's an example of what goes on in every industry. And it's a study of the steel industry that we did a number of years ago. The question was, there's a class of steel companies called mini mills that have now grown up to account for about 65% of North America's steel production. How have they been so successful? Because most of the world's steel historically was made in huge integrated mills of the sort that line the southern shore of Lake Michigan. It costs today about $10 billion to build a new integrated mill. Mini mills melt scrap in electric furnaces, and you could easily fit 30 electric furnaces in this room. Because you can get molten steel in such small chambers, you don't have to scale up the downstream processing steps, and that's why they call these things mini mills. The most important dimension of a mini mill is you can make steel of any given quality in a mini mill for 20% lower cost than you can make it in an integrated mill. Just think about this for a minute. Imagine that you were running a steel company somewhere in the world. In a really good year, your profit as a percent of sales will be between 2 and 4%. Here is a widely available technology that would reduce your full cost of making steel by 20%. Don't you think you'd adopt this? And yet not a single integrated steel company anywhere in the world has yet successfully built and operated a mini mill. And this is my sense for why something that makes so much sense can actually be impossible for good managers to accomplish. So I've plotted on this axis a schematic of this industry. Like every industry, it's comprised of tiers. The simplest product at the bottom is concrete reinforcing bar. The most complicated one is sheet steel that's used to make appliances and cars. At the beginning of this story, the integrated steel companies made the full range of these products. But mini mills, when they became technologically viable in the late 60s, because they melted scrap in their furnaces, the quality they could make was really marginal. In fact, the only market that would buy what the mini mills made was the rebar market down at the bottom, because there are almost no specs for rebar anyway, and then once you buried it in cement, you could never verify if it met spec. So it was a great market for crummy products. As the mini mills attacked rebar, the reaction of the integrated mills was just to get out of the business because it was such a dog-eat-dog commodity. Their gross margins were only 7%. It accounted only for 4% of the industry's tons. So as the mini mills expanded their capacity to make rebar, the integrated mills just shut the rebar lines down, or they reconfigured them to make angle iron and thicker bar and rod. The reason is they could make 12% margins up there. It just didn't make sense to defend the less profitable end of the business against lower cost competitors when they had the option to strengthen their share where the margins were a lot better. Then an interesting thing happened to their financial statements. As they lopped off the lowest profit part of the product line, their reported profit margins to Wall Street improved. So it actually felt good to get driven out of rebar. The mini mills, because they had a 20% cost advantage, their reported margins were beautiful, and so it felt good to get into rebar. And there was a détente in the industry for nearly 20 years until in 1979, the mini mills finally succeeded in driving the last high-cost integrated player out of the rebar market. If you look at the historical prices for rebar in 1979, they collapsed by 20%. It just turns out that there's a subtle fact about strategy that nobody thought about before, and that is a low-cost strategy only works when there's a high-cost competitor in the market. And as soon as they had been driven out, it was just low-cost mini mill fighting against low-cost mini mill in a commodity business, and very quickly competition drove prices down to the point where nobody could make money. So what do you think the poor mini mills are going to do? Well, they try to get more efficient making rebar, but that's just a recipe for survival. And then one of them looked up market and realized, holy cow, if we could just make bigger and better steel, we'd make money again, because the margins in angle iron and bar and rod are so much better. So they stretched their ability to begin making those products, and as they attacked that tier of the market, the reaction of the integrated mills was, man, they were relieved to wash their hands of that business, because it too was a dog-eat-dog commodity. And why would they ever invest to defend a crummy 12% margin business when they had the option of focusing their capital in structural beams where the margins are so much better? So the very same thing happened. As the mini mills expanded their capacity to make bar, rod, and angle iron, the integrated mills just shut those lines down or reconfigured them to make bigger structural beams. As the integrated mills lopped off the volume at the low end of their product structure, their reported gross margins to Wall Street actually improved again. It felt good to be driven out of those businesses. As the mini mills got into the very same products, they had a 20% cost advantage again, so it felt good to get in.